Hello, this is Jessica Garrett Mills, and I'm going to be talking to you all today about supporting executive functioning skills during challenging times and in challenging environments. I'm really excited to be talking to Upper Arlington support staff and maybe some teachers, both in this video and then this coming Thursday when we're going to talk about putting some of these executive functioning skills into practice and putting those supports into practice for our students during hybrid learning and whatever comes next. I've been an executive functioning coach in Columbus for about 12 years now. I work privately with families, so I get to really dig deep with them. And I know that support staff at schools sometimes don't have that luxury. So we're going to be talking about how to make some practical changes, some practical supports, and how to, what you're already doing that's working, and maybe some different things we'll need to try as we move into hybrid learning. So thanks for hanging in there with me. Today we're talking about executive functioning skills. This is kind of an overview of what are the executive functioning skills to give us a common vocabulary. I know some of you are already experts in this, but hopefully I can share something that's slightly different or slightly new. Links for this video and a guided notes document are at ontrackacademiccoaching.com/UAPD. I'm trying to practice what I preach pedagogically, and so these guided notes will help you stay focused during this presentation and let you walk away with, a document that has some information that might be helpful. Executive functioning skills are the skills you need to execute tasks. And when we look at this brain, we can see the red part here, which is right up front, the frontal cortex. And a human brain is massively modular. There are different areas of the brain that are responsible for housing different sorts of tasks. And the area of the brain that we're focusing on today is that frontal cortex, or even more specifically, the prefrontal cortex, right here in the forehead. And we talk about all of these executive functioning skills being housed up here in the prefrontal cortex. And of course, that's oversimplifying, but it is true that when we look at a brain of someone who is trying really hard to execute these executive functioning tasks, that part of the brain seems to be recruiting a lot of oxygen and a lot of blood flow because that's the part of the brain that's working really hard. And when we look at the brain of someone who is really struggling or not doing these executive functioning skills, it seems that that part of the brain is a little bit sluggish. So I find it helpful, even if it's kind of just a metaphor, to think about these executive functioning skills being housed right here at the front of the brain. It helps us remember that they are a separate skill that can be behind maybe some other skills. It's easy to think of ourselves as maybe someone who's not good at spelling or someone who's not good at directions. But it's harder to remember that some people are not good at executing tasks. You can be good at some things and not at others. You can be good at math and not good at doing math. You can be good at writing and not good at making yourself write. And those are separate things. And it's good to, remember that people have strengths and people have weaknesses. And these executive functioning skills are often so pervasive that they hide the strengths. Before we get into what are the executive functioning skills, I want to talk about some major brain functions that these executive functioning skills rest on. Executive functioning weaknesses are brain-based weaknesses. They're biologically based weaknesses. And when they rely on working memory, self-control, otherwise known as inhibitory control, and flexibility. These are kind of the bedrock. But then when we talk about what are the executive functioning skills, there are as many answers to this question as there are people talking about executive functioning skills. There are probably hundreds of executive functioning skills, but that's not super useful when we're trying to figure out how to support students. There are First, let's talk about some metaphors for what are executive functioning skills. A lot of great ones that I like and that I use with students and families. Executive functioning skills are the air traffic control of the brain. Executive functioning skills are the steering wheel and the brakes of the brain, sometimes the gas too. Executive functioning skills are the conductor of the brain's orchestra, which helps us remember that that brain is massively modular. There's lots of different parts that are working together to make things happen, and you need a conductor to say, like, okay, you a little louder, you a little softer. Executive functioning skills are the mom of the brain. This is a nice metaphor for students who are hoping to work mom out of a job, out of her job as the executive functioner for the student. And another metaphor students really like is that executive functioning skills are the boss of the brain. And I find this is helpful when talking with students, because you can say, like, you need to be the boss of your brain. Yes, of course this is boring. Yes, of course you don't want to get started. But who's the boss? That frontal cortex is the boss. So let's recruit some energy. Let's use our tools. Let's use our strategies so that you can be the boss of that. You can be in control of that. And that's a message that a lot of my students really resonate with. My list of executive functioning skills that I'm going to present here in a second is based heavily on Peg Dawson and Richard Guar's work. They're the Smart But Scattered folks. I really love that book. It's a great resource for parents. And you can think of these skills as grouped into foundational skills and advanced skills. The foundational skills emerge first in the developmental trajectory. So we're working on these skills from early on, probably 3 years old through high school. And then the advanced skills build upon those foundational skills. And we probably aren't ready to do those advanced skills independently, certainly not till high school, and some students not until college for sure. They don't develop until much later. That's the takeaway. So the foundational skills include impulse control, also known as response inhibition. The ability to not do the thing that you kind of want to do right now. I'm going to talk about how these skills show up in learning and how they show up in behavior. So this shows up in learning like a student who jumps into work without reading directions, a student who struggles with Mother May I, for instance, for younger students. You want to do the thing, you say it out loud, you set your intention, somebody tells you not to do it, and now you have to stop. That's hard. You are watching a boring video that a teacher posted. It's fine, but it's not like the most exciting thing. And you get a text message. You have to control that impulse. I mean, how many of us struggle with that? In terms of behavior, we might see students blurting out hurtful things to peers or classmates. We might see them struggling to do whatever the older equivalent of freeze dance is, where you're doing a thing and you have to stop. That's hard, especially for students struggling with impulse control. Next up is working memory. And this is one of those brain-based foundational things that I was talking about. Working memory is the ability to have several mental balls in the air that you're juggling at one time. The bad news about working memory is there's not much we can do to teach it. The good news is there's lots of workarounds. So our job is helping students work around a weak working memory. Maybe working memory will improve over time. It does for a lot of people. But in the meantime, students need some skills to work around. A student with weak working memory might forget to put their math book in their backpack. They might forget what they're looking for as they're going in to find information on the learning portal. I'm seeing this come up a lot with students these days, especially those moving to hybrid, where they're at home, they've got everything spread out, they're doing their school day at home, and then they have to pack everything up and have it accessible, take it to school, do school, and then come home, unpack everything. That requires a lot of working memory to get everything. Like, what do I need for tomorrow? Okay, remember that. Now find the folder. Okay, so now I've got the folder. What was it that I was thinking of? Oh, right, that worksheet. Is it in the folder? That's a lot of working memory steps, and students are struggling. And it's leading to them not even having the materials they need for school, let alone being able to engage with the curriculum. I'm seeing students struggle when they get into the learning portal. They remember, okay, I had chemistry homework. Let me go check. So they do a couple clicks online to find their teacher's chemistry um, classroom site. And by the time they get there, they can't remember what they were looking for in the first place. Or they can't remember where this teacher puts homework. Is it in the assignments? Is it in, the syllabus? Whatever. So working memory is a struggle right now, especially under current conditions. In terms of behavior, students might forget rules to a game or forget rules for working problems or forget classroom rules while they're trying to do other tasks. Next up is self-regulation, also known as emotional control or emotional regulation. Um, I am seeing self-regulatory problems with most of my clients right now. Emotions are running high. Students are getting frustrated. They're shutting down when they don't understand the homework for the day. They're getting overwhelmed when they look at a day's worth of work. They're getting overwhelmed when they are starting their day. They're getting overwhelmed towards the end of the day. There's a lot of emotional regulatory challenges right now. And that's not just our students, right? I'm sure that you're feeling it too. I'm sure your families are feeling it. This is a trying time when it comes to emotional regulation. And not only is emotional regulation hard, but there's a lot more to be emotional about. So, I mean, rationally, I think we're all feeling a little overwhelmed right now. And if you're struggling to regulate that emotion, this is going to be that much harder. Behavior wise, we might see a student lashing out at peers when something at recess is upsetting, or not being able to reach out to peers because they're having trouble regulating their emotions about the pandemic. And so they can't deal with peers right now. Flexibility. Again, man, during this pandemic, we are asking of ourselves and our students and our families so much flexibility. It is hard. And for someone struggling with executive functions, it's really hard. I'm seeing students have significantly more challenge with doing slightly bigger projects or especially open-ended projects. A lot of teachers want to give students choice because for a typical student that can be motivating. And so they say, write a paper about something you found interesting in this video or write a response. For my kids, that kind of choice can be kryptonite. It's too much choice. These open-ended tasks are too hard. They need someone to say, write about this, do one paragraph, use 5 sentences. They need firm guidelines so that they can start the task. And I'm going to talk about, task initiation next. With too much flexibility comes a huge challenge with task initiation. Our schedules are changing constantly, right? We were all online. Now we're hybrid. Now, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be moving back to school at some point, or maybe we'll be moving back to all online. We don't know. There's only so much we can do to clear up that ambiguity for our students because we just don't know. So students have to be flexible, but it's an executive function. So students struggling with executive functioning challenges are really struggling with this one right now. Behavior wise, we might see someone get really upset when something is canceled or they think they're going to go back online or back in person, and then at the last minute that doesn't happen. That requires emotional regulation, that self-regulatory skill we were talking about a minute ago. You feel all those feelings and then you have to regulate those. It's hard. It's really hard right now. Let's see, task initiation. That's getting started, just what it sounds like. This is one that I think a lot of teachers notice and flag. And this might be the first indication from a teacher that something's going on here. A student that they know is capable seems unable to get started. Students are doing a lot of independent work lately, and the tasks are a little ambiguous, which makes task initiation all that much harder. They have trouble taking that first step. They have trouble knowing what the first step is. And sometimes there's also some emotional regulatory stuff involved here because they don't know what the task is. They maybe think it's much bigger than it actually is. And so they just avoid and they can't get started. So combining poor task initiation with low frustration tolerance makes for a really challenging situation. Sustained attention. This is the next step of task initiation. If we can get them started, can they then stay focused? Students might get distracted before completing their seat work. They get started, they hear the directions, they get started, but then they're gone again 5 minutes in or 10 minutes in. An easy rule, a rule of thumb, though certainly it's not research-based, but it stands to reason, that we shouldn't ask a typical student to spend more than about 1 minute per year of age doing an online video watching task, like not where they're engaging, but where they're just watching. So that means for a kindergartner, maybe one picture book that they watch a video of online before they have to do something, before they have to be engaged and active. So for a middle school student, we're talking about a 10 or 15-minute video. For a high school student, 15-minute, maybe 18-minute video. And that's for a typical student. So our students with executive functioning challenges who are struggling with sustained attention, maybe we're talking 3 or 4 years behind. So it could be that a high school student really can't manage more than 10 minutes of watching something that they think is not super engaging. And remember, they're used to like really, Netflix at a keystroke. So they're used to like really high production value videos. And even those of us, I mean, I wouldn't count myself among them, but those teachers that really have it going on, they know how to make an engaging video. It's still not Netflix. So we need to be really conscious of short bursts. We're talking about sprints of attention, attentional sprints. I talk to my students about that all the time. Can we stop a video 5 minutes in and have them do something? And then stop the video 5 minutes later and have them do something so that it's these sprints of attention. Students might not listen to instructions, or they might get distracted playing a sport, maybe even a sport that they're really into. They might be off in La La Land out on the field. Okay, now we're moving into the more advanced skills. So those were all the foundational skills. And now the advanced skills which build upon those foundational skills. So for instance, planning and prioritizing. This requires working memory, flexibility, emotional control sometimes as you're building a very busy day and they start to get frustrated and overwhelmed just looking at it. It requires time estimation, which I'm not counting as an executive functioning skill, but it, I think, probably could be. So all of those things must be in play in order to effectively plan and prioritize. A lot of times we expect our high school students to be able to plan and prioritize independently. And I think most of them can do it to an extent, but I think none of them are mastering this skill. And our students with executive functioning challenges are really struggling. And by junior year, when we've kind of taken the training wheels off, they are left without a safety net. And if they can't plan and prioritize, especially when they're doing a lot of work at home, they're spending a full day potentially doing asynchronous work. If they don't have some planning and prioritizing supports, they are not going to be effectively accessing the curriculum. So a student might have difficulty carrying out long-term projects or even planning out their day. What are they going to get started with? We'll talk about this a lot on Thursday because I think there's an enormous gap here between what we expect of students and what my students can manage independently. And in that gap falls everything. Like everything falls through the cracks. Okay, organizing. And this includes both organizing our stuff and organizing our thoughts. So you might see a student losing papers, messy notebooks, backpacks a mess, but also the the equivalent in a paper that they've written. It's just all over the place, and their thoughts are not organized in a sequential way that anybody else could follow. Um, this shows up in behavior when they have trouble keeping track of equipment or leaving behind things behind at school. Um, Again, that messy backpack and messy stuff, I think, is going to become, as we move to hybrid, even more of a sore spot than it was when we were fully in person or fully online, because they have to switch between two plans, between two systems. At home they've got one system, at school they've got another, and they've got to switch halfway through the day, and each week is different, which can be really hard to organize around. And then each week being different requires flexibility, requires self-regulation, requires working memory. What kind of day is today? It's an in-person day. What does that mean? What do I need to bring? um, it's a lot. It's a lot. Time management. A lot of my students don't notice time passing. They just don't feel time the way that a typical student might. You tell them, be back in 20 minutes. That means literally nothing to them. They misjudge how much time something will take as well. And sometimes they overestimate, which leads to meltdown because, like, oh, it's going to take 4 days. There's no way I have 4 days. When really it would only take an hour if they would get started. Or they underestimate and they think, oh, I got time to do that, when they do not have time to do that. So again, this is something that develops over time. We can have them practice and they will get better through practice, but it takes time. And in the meantime, we need strategies. We need them using timers. If a timer like this stresses them out, there's other strategies to help them feel time passing, because it's not something that they're good at. I see students when they get overwhelmed by how much they think they have, or they waited till the last minute and now it's too much, and now they're having emotional regulatory issues because they know they can't get it done in time. And then it seems sort of illogical, but they then immediately turn to TikTok or YouTube or something to self-soothe because they're so overwhelmed. And even though to someone with different different executive functioning skills, with better executive functioning skills, they might say, well, I've only got an hour to do 2 hours of work. Let's get started right now and make it happen. Or let's email the teacher right now and see if I can get an extension. For my students, their impulse is, let's check out. Let's hide under a rock. Let's go watch YouTube for half an hour until I've got my emotions back under control, and then I'll try and do the work. But now there's only half an hour, so the problem compounds. So we can help them with some time management skills that will keep them from getting to that place where they shut down. Goal-directed persistence. This is like the long-term version of sustained attention. A student who doesn't set goals for the future, or they have sort of vague goals for the future, but those goals aren't connected to their present day-to-day activities. They want to go to college, but they don't want to invest the time right now. Students with executive functioning challenges really live in the moment. And we're always saying that, right? Live in the moment, live in the moment. But it turns out you can't live entirely in the moment. It's not a very effective place to be. We need to make choices about what we're doing now based on now and the future and the past. And combining those time horizons is really hard. It's a very advanced skill for a typical student, and my students just aren't there yet. They need a lot of scaffolding to get there. This is interesting when we start talking about transition planning, because you sit down with a 10th grader to talk about transition planning post high school, and they really can't make that leap. Maybe they have some dreams about the future. Maybe they've been told by parents you're going to college, end of story, or whatever the outside direction they're getting is. But making that connection between now and then is so very hard. And it's something they just need a ton of support with. Um, so, again, for a student who is struggling with goal directed persistence, there is only right now. And we have to help them lengthen that time horizon, both learning from the past and thinking about what we're doing now and how it affects the future. And then the mother of all executive functioning skills, metacognition. This is self-awareness. The development of mature metacognition is probably the last skill to emerge. Most high school seniors are not masterful metacognators. Probably it doesn't fully develop until after college even. This is, unfortunately, metacognition also increases a student's ability to access all the other skills and know about their strengths and weaknesses, which is another thing we ask them to do during transition planning. So we just need to remember they need a lot of support here. They can't just do it on their own usually. In learning, we see students struggle with tasks that require abstract thinking. There's tons of interesting research on abstract thinking, and a lot of theoreticians argue that abstract reasoning doesn't really develop until post-high school years. It's developing through middle school and high school, but it isn't fully developed until post-high school. And in fact, that abstract reasoning is not biological, but it has to be learned through culture. And in this case, culture probably mostly means formal schooling. So if a student can't attend to what's happening in school, they're really going to struggle to develop abstract reasoning and metacognition. We see this in behavior when a student can't really see the impact of their behavior on others, or I see it all the time when students can't see how the email that they wrote might be interpreted by a teacher, or why waiting till the last minute might make the teacher less open about helping them. But those are things that can be directly taught. And again, it could be that metacognition is only learned through direct instruction that way. That's probably overstating it, but that a lot of metacognition can be directly taught. Okay, so executive functioning skills allow a person to execute their intentions. Notice this isn't about motivation or desire or intent or what they want to do. In fact, a strong desire or interest to do something probably means you need fewer executive functioning skills, or you need to harness fewer executive functioning skills in order to make it happen. If I'm really deeply interested in doing a craft project or playing video games, I don't need very strong executive functioning skills to make that happen. It's when something is boring or slightly outside my wheelhouse, or feels a little too hard or feels a little too easy, that's when we need to recruit executive functioning skills. For my students with poor executive functioning skills, things that are too hard or too easy or too boring or not interesting or not challenging, when they think about that task, it feels like this huge mountain that they've got to climb, and they suspect they're not going to be able to get there. So they think, I have to learn 40 vocab words. It's both boring and too hard in their mind. I'm not interested, so I can't get motivated just through pure interest. I don't know that I'll be successful, so I can't get motivated by the very short-term reward I'll get. What am I going to do? This really high mountain makes them not even want to take the first step. But if we can help them break it down, either stoke interest or break it down into a teeny, 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 weeny little step so that they know they'll be successful, that they'll leap right over that hurdle, then maybe they're willing to take that first step. And it allows them then to execute on their intentions. I find this hard to understand sometimes, or feel in my gut, especially for bright kids, because sometimes it feels like they really just don't want to, or it feels like they won't. But we need to remember that this is not a won't, this is a can't. That they need the supports, they need someone to hold their hand and build that scaffolding so that they can. And when they can, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, when they can, they will. When they feel like they can and they have the skills, they will. So I want to get that, like, put on the wall behind every teacher. If they could, they would. Okay? When they feel like they can, they will. That is a major takeaway that, again, I suspect I'm preaching to the choir here, because I know you guys are all in the business of helping students feel like they can and gain the skills so that they can. But we also need to help teachers understand this. They would if they could. Sometimes it looks like they won't, but usually that is a lagging skill that they need to learn those skills so that they can. And then when they do, their self-efficacy rises, right? Which makes them then feel like they can on the next thing. So if we give them the skills and support them so they can, it's self-perpetuating. So I promised a little bit about maturation of executive functioning skills. The main thing here that I want you to know is that frontal cortex, while it's at its adult size relatively early, it is still maturing in terms of the number of neuronal connections and the amount of myelination and insulation in the brain. It's still building connections and still growing in strength until probably almost 30 years old. So if you're talking to a 15-year-old or the parent of a 15-year-old and they're worried about their student, and they don't know, when they're going to finally get these skills, their brain is only like halfway through the window of development of the frontal cortex. There is plenty of time. And if we do nothing, they will probably gain in those skills. If we can also give them some supports and some strategies, we can see them really take off. I think this is really interesting, this graphic of fMRI here. If you look at the 4-year-old, the red and the orange and the yellow is less mature, and the blue and then the purple is more mature. And if you look at this frontal cortex right here, there's very little purple blue. Very little purple and blue. Oops. By 13, we're starting to see a little bit of blue. Oops, I'm sorry. And then by 21 years old, we see quite a bit of blue, but still not a ton of purple in this frontal cortex area. So there's a lot of maturation still to come once they leave your school. And that, most parents find that incredibly comforting. Executive functions come into play in lots of different learning disabilities and disorders. ADHD, of course, other learning disabilities. We see executive functioning weaknesses sometimes with students with dyslexia. It's a comorbidity for some students. Anxiety disorders lead to a lot of executive functioning challenges. Like if imagine you're worried about you're stressed out about getting through the day, you're not thinking about the future. You're not planning and prioritizing. You're just trying to get through the next minute or so. You're trying to regulate your emotions so hard that you're not really getting to these other deeper processing skills. Oppositional defiance disorder and other conduct disorders. Autism sometimes, not always, comes with some executive functioning challenges. I would say often, but not always. And then some other medical and neurological disorders, including TBI, fetal alcohol syndrome, and PKU, which is one that I am only just now learning about because of a client I have. So I suspect there are others that I don't know about as well. Other very medically based conditions that have some executive functioning challenges. And then executive functioning issues come into play in a completely typically developing child. Anytime that student feels stress, anytime the requirements of the environment are greater than their developing executive functioning skills. So if you have a 10th grader who is typically developing, but they're in a situation like, say, a pandemic, where they're switching back and forth from home to school, and they're switching daily what their typical schedule is, that can lead to some executive functioning challenges. I'm feeling it in my own life. These are difficult times, and we are all operating at the max when it comes to executive functioning. So we just need to be really patient, and we need to support our students the best we can. We're going to get to that piece, that how do we support them, on Thursday, because I know that's like really what y'all are looking for. Executive functioning issues are often misunderstood. I hear students call themselves lazy or unmotivated all the time, which breaks my heart, because once they get to that place where they accept, I'm just lazy, it's really hard to dial it back and rebuild. No, you're not lazy. There's something else going on. But lazy is a safe place for a student to land. Like, oh, I'm just lazy. So it's hard to have them give that up and think instead, no, there's an issue here that needs to be dealt with. Sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the parents are the problem. And look, I mean, parents can certainly improve, and there's a lot of good training and supports we can give to parents for students that are struggling here. But this is a biological, neurological condition that is not due to poor parenting. So it's not helpful to think, well, this is the parent's problem. Because look, even if it was, we still have to support the students where they are right now. Sometimes, especially with girls, we label them just as kind of spacey or out in la la land, I hear. They're not disruptive, but they're not accessing the curriculum. Sometimes students just seem messy. If you saw my desk now, you'd wonder. But messy can lead to inability to keep your paper straight. Messy can mean messy thoughts as well. And then the two most destructive ones, I think, are thinking that a student just doesn't care, or that they're just stubborn. They just won't. And I think those are really destructive for a student who feels like, yeah, but I am trying and I do care. So what does that mean about me? So we just want to be careful that our parents aren't using that language, and our teachers aren't using that language, and our students are not using that language, and that they haven't sort of internalized it either. This is a main takeaway from today, I think, and something that I suspect is already in your heart. Students do well when they can. They really, I believe this in my heart. And it's what allows me, I think, to meet students with an understanding that they are trying and that we're in it together, that the student and I are a team. And I suspect that's what you all are aiming for as well. The last thing is this handout that is going to be on that web page as well, the www.ontrackacademiccoaching.com/UAPD. And this is a little self-assessment. So again, trying to practice what I preach pedagogically. I want you to check in with that self-assessment, see if you can label when they list an executive function, or they have a little description of an executive function. Can you think like, okay, that's task initiation, or that's self-regulation, or whatever. See what you can pick up, or what you have picked up. And then I'm going to see you all on Thursday on Zoom. And I'm looking forward to kind of digging in with this as the foundation. What can we do? So yeah, times are hard. Yeah, students are struggling. So what now? What can we do to support them so that we can all get through this and get to the other side? Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you all. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll talk to you soon.